Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday night service. That helps. Okay. Glad you guys are here. Beautiful day we've had compared to the last couple of days. We'll start with some announcements. The ladies' devotional will be tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. at the home of Ina Ruth McCune. Please bring a friend and come to be encouraged. The college group will meet at the home of Mike and Terry Allen tomorrow night, 6 p.m. for Bible study. Speak with Tanner Roland if you need a ride. TNT for the teens is this Friday, 6 p.m. at the FLC. Visitors are welcome. Jeff has an announcement at this time.
Just a real quick announcement about the Elder Fraud Seminar that's coming up this Saturday at 9 o'clock. A reminder that you'll remember from our sharing with you earlier, one of the focuses of our congregation going forward is being the home for hope for Rolla and providing resources to our community to draw them in and connect them to our church family. So this Elder Fraud event is not only a benefit to us, but it is specifically an outreach effort into our community. So even if you're not elderly, if you are not elderly and don't have senior parents that you're concerned about, or you're a young person in your 30s and you have no concern about ever being defrauded, you can still come and encourage the visitors, the townspeople that come, and welcome them to our church family. This is an outreach event, and this is part of our overall plan of connecting with our community. We did a test with Perry Wu, the former FBI agent that's going to be presenting. He shared his bio. Really impressive guy, UCLA graduate, former CPA, many certifications, 20 years with the FBI, currently doing digital forensics in California as a consultant. This guy knows his stuff. And I really hope that you'll plan on being there and inviting people as an outreach. Invite your neighbors, say, hey, you ought to come to this. It's going to be good. We're looking forward to it. If you want to help with the coffee and donut table that will be there on the break, please see Allison. She's going to help coordinate that for us. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Family life groups will meet this Sunday. Group times and locations are posted on the website and on the bulletin board. Following our recent Songfest, Acapella Ministries is offering us a discount code for a subscription to Praise and Harmony TV and other perks. Information is on the bulletin board. I do have one more announcement. In Kansas City, at this time until the 22nd of March, they have some documents from the founding of the United States. So if you have not seen those, it'll be a good time to see it. They're only doing it at 6 cities, and it's free. The hardest thing is getting there, standing in line for about 4 hours or 3 hours. Now, if you go with a school group, you can jump the line. So if anybody wants to take a school group, you can jump the line right there. We went, Becky and I, and it was something else with the wind blowing, and it was outside, most of it, the line, before we got inside. But we had a group of people near us that were really good at talking, so that helped. So it went well. Tonight, we'll have a talk and a specific topic here, but I won't say it right away. Many times we watch sporting events. Some of you do, some of you don't. And sometimes we ride with a team versus another one. Many times I don't, but sometimes I do. And I do want my team to win, and I don't want them to win by a small amount. I don't want to be worried throughout the game. If I'm just watching for fun, I don't mind how close the scores are. I like that. That keeps me going. But if the scores are far apart, that's when I'm glad I'm riding with that team that's winning. Anyway, the thing is, there's always a loser and there's a winner. And when our team wins, do we celebrate that our team won? Or do we celebrate that the other team lost? There's a difference, right? There's a difference of how we look at it. Are we celebrating it that way? Another thing is that sometimes somebody is on the other side from us, either political or otherwise, or even an enemy or something like that, and something bad happened to them. Should we celebrate? No. We had some recent people being killed recently, and some people actually celebrated. Can you imagine that? At least I don't think anybody in here should have celebrated, regardless of who died and what they believe. We as Christians are not supposed to do that. We know better. The Bible says if we celebrate under those circumstances where somebody is having issues like that, then God can also turn the table on us. And He will. So let's not, I know sometimes I feel like maybe I should. Then I caught myself and I have to stop. And so we need to work on that, try to make sure we do that, do better than that. And the word that I wanted to use here is compassion. I looked up the meaning. It says it includes empathy and sympathy. In other words, we care about other people who are in distress. But then we take it a step further. We want action. We got to do something. It's nice to have the feeling of caring and want to do things, but also doing something also a lot better, but also necessary. Because the heart has to be right, and then the action must be right. If we just have the right actions and the heart is wrong, that's not good either, because God knows what we're doing. We might be trying to get an edge, a corner in something, or try to find a way into something. Okay, in Matthew chapter 9, verse 30, what we'll do now is look at some examples of what Jesus did and how He dealt with compassion, how He had compassion. I look up the word compassion in the Old Testament. There are so many examples of it. A lot more, of course, the Old Testament is a lot longer than the New Testament, a lot more times than in the New Testament. But it does occur quite a bit in the New Testament as well. So let's see what Jesus did about it. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 36. That's when the crowds were out there and they were harassed, they were confused, they were in a bad situation. What happened is the religious leaders were teaching more traditions rather than what God wanted them to teach. They were teaching more tradition than what God wanted. And so the people were in not the best situation. When Jesus came along, He was a breath of fresh air. He taught them, as one with authority, He taught them things that they needed, things that were there from the very beginning, because even at the giving of the Ten Commandments, God always wanted us to love God first and love others next. And we cannot do one without the other. Well, maybe we can love I don't know if we really can do it horizontally without loving God. Usually we put God first. And without loving God, it's hard to love other people as well. But, so the crowds were harassed and they had issues. So Jesus spent time with them. He taught them. He healed the sick. And He showed them a better way than the religious teachers were teaching them. You see, today, if anybody does that to us, we should know better because we read the Bible. We understand what God wants for us. And so we can walk off and leave them alone. In Matthew chapter 14, verse 14, and they were in a remote place, and Jesus was teaching them, and it became very late, and they had no food, these people, and nowhere to go get the food. And so the disciples, Jesus told them to give them something to eat. And the disciples said, how can we feed those people? There's just too many of them. And so Jesus asked them, what do you have? And they said, we have 5 loaves and 2 fish. And so they brought it to Jesus, and he blessed it, and they passed it around, and they had enough for 5,000 men, besides women and children. So that's quite a few people got fed. He also taught them. He also healed the sick. So he had compassion on them. In Matthew chapter 15, verse 20, he told the story of the prodigal son. This son who took everything. Actually, the first son was the one who was supposed to get the inheritance. The second son, well, who knows, they might get a little something here or there, but not much. But he wanted something anyway. And so the father gave it to him, and he went off. He blew it all. Then he came to his senses, and he said, his people at home have all this stuff, and we don't. And I don't at this time. How many of you ever worked with pigs? Pig, okay, at least one person. Okay, then you understand some of this, what's going on here. I did work when I was like 16 years old. I was at this one-year college, agriculture college, and they had us go to the Mennonite community. They weren't really Amish, but, well, they have tractors and cars and all that. So they're not really Amish as such. But we would go there and try to learn from them what they did. They had really nice farms like here in the States. And so this one family did pigs. I went there every other week. I went to another farm another week, every other week too. And so while there, we had to work with the pigs. We had to clean the pig pens, feed the pigs, and do what's needed. To be honest, that was the hardest job I had, because when it came to lunchtime, I didn't want to eat. All that smell was still with me. I couldn't. And they tried to keep it as clean as possible, but that was awful. And it even caught, and that family used to usually serve spaghetti at that time. I had an aversion to spaghetti after that, so I've had to overcome that some. Anyway, so this guy needed food, and only had the food that the pigs were eating. So he went back home, and the father had compassion on him. He saw him a long way off, and he had compassion on him. Gave him the best robe, had a feast for him, welcome him back. That's what we're looking forward to, right? We'll be welcomed back when we go to paradise and then to heaven. In John chapter 11, verse 35, we have where the death of Lazarus occurred. First, Jesus was teaching, and then the message came that he needs to go because Lazarus was sick. So then he kept teaching and kept doing what he was doing. Then Lazarus passed away. So because of Lazarus passing, he just mentioned that Lazarus went to sleep. They thought he was, well, if it's sleeping, why are we going still? He's okay. He said, no, he died. So he went over there, and he saw Mary and Martha grieving. And so the Bible said Jesus wept. In John chapter 11, verse 35, Jesus wept. Why did he weep? Because they were grieving. That's one of the reasons he wept. He had compassion on them. Jesus knew that the religious leaders would also, in the future, plot to kill Lazarus. He knew what was going to happen again to Lazarus. Then, bringing Lazarus from a good place, paradise, he was gone several days. And then Jesus brought him back to our world. That couldn't have been easy, right? And Jesus knew better. For us, we say it's a good place, but we don't really understand this. So he raised Lazarus from the dead. And so that action showed empathy and corrective action. So he had empathy on the girls and Lazarus and what would happen. and he did something to bring him back. And the main reason, one of the main reasons why he brought Lazarus back was because he needed to show the power that God had over death. Show the power of resurrection, and then to use somebody like that and people suffering along the way. It was not an easy thing. I mean, when Jesus was at the cross, he also had a hard time. He had to go through some tough times. And so in life, we also have those to deal with. So Jesus, in Luke chapter 7, verse 12 to 15, that's where they have the widow of Nain. Her son passed away, her only son. And so Jesus saw her and had compassion on her. And he stopped the group from going, and then he raised the kid from the dead and gave him back to his mom. Compassion again. Jesus did not judge, did not do anything else. He just had compassion, and he took action. Sometimes we want to say things and do things, other things, but sometimes we just something simple needed. Maybe I'm not always a hugging type, but sometimes maybe just need to hug somebody who is hurting and help them along, because sometimes words can't do it. Words are not enough. I always wondered about in Matthew chapter 26, verse 11, Jesus said, "You'll have the poor with you always." That seems kind of tough one to deal with. What he was actually saying, though, there are some things more important than the poor. Physically speaking, much more important than the poor. Jesus was getting ready for his death, so that was more important than dealing with the poor at that time. Saving a lost soul is a lot more important than feeding the poor, taking care of the poor. I'm glad we do have a clothing room. We have a food pantry to help those who are in need. And we have a few other means that the elders use and that we use here at the church. And those are all important. But our main effort should always be the souls rather than the physical. And so I do understand when the elders said that's the most important part of our benevolence ministry, that we somehow either start a Bible study, invite them to come to church or something. And so we try to do that and as much as we can. Okay, thank you all for your attention. Time for classes. Little longer.
All right. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you, Alex, Brother Williams, for doing the Devo. All right. So I'm taking some muscle relaxants. And the thing about, at least the ones that I'm taking, they cross the blood-brain barrier. So I am indeed foggy tonight. So try not to stump me too bad. It just might work. All right. And again, thanks, Jeff, with all the setting up with the elder fraud this Saturday, 9 o'clock. Okay, we sometimes call them rags to riches or Cinderella stories. People, of course, they will write books about them and make movies about them. And there are actually a number of them in the Bible. And so let's see some trivia here. Can you think of any? What are some of the rags to riches stories in the Bible? Okay, so David, of course, with the shepherd boy to king of Israel. Good. Joseph, all right, in prison, and then he's second in charge of all of Egypt. What are some others? Saul becoming the king, yeah, and he was what were they, donkey herders or something? They raised donkeys or something. Yeah, that's true. Who else? Okay, so Esther, definitely, she became the queen of Persia. Job is an interesting one because it's actually riches to rags, back to riches. Mm-hmm. So Ruth, she was a poor foreign woman, but she married Boaz, who was a rich, very rich landowner. Yeah, good. Daniel. Okay, so Daniel, yeah, he was a captive. He was one of the captives, and yet he became one of the highest dudes in Babylon as far as the officials and as far as having a lot of respect and everything else. Good. So there are quite a few of these. Let me see if you guys got all the ones that I had thought of. Probably. You guys are, I tell you, Lloyd and I teach a Bible study on Thursdays. And I'll ask what I believe are basic Bible questions, and it's just like a deer in the headlights. But they're questions that you would know the answer to every single one of them, and I'm very proud of you guys with your Bible knowledge. So today we're going to be looking at another one of these rags to riches stories. And it's not one of the well-known ones, though. It's Mephibosheth. And so he was a young man. He was crippled, and he was living in an obscure place. Sounds like he was living in hiding, and yet this is going to happen to him. All right, so if you would, grab your Bible, and let's be turning back to the book of 2 Samuel. So we're continuing our study through 1 and 2 Samuel, trying to find application for Christians, for 21st century American Christians, as well as trying to understand the text, of course. Now, last week we looked at chapters 7 and 8, and that was on David's plan to build the temple. And from that section, I wanted us to see the importance of accepting and even praising God for his answers, even when they are no. Today, though, we're going to be looking at chapters 9 and 10, David's desire to show kindness. And from this section, I really want us to see the importance of reciprocating the kindness that God has shown us, reciprocating it to others. Remember, it's a class. So if you have a question, go ahead or if you have a comment, stop us and bring it out. That's acceptable. We do use a microphone, and you got the microphone, brother. And so if you do raise your hand, we'll bring that to you. That's so everyone in class can hear you as well as everyone watching online. Okay, so first of all, let's start with David's desire to show kindness to the house of Saul. So who'd like to start us off with verses 1 through 4? Thank you.
Reading from the New American Standard. Then David said, "Is there yet anyone left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of the house of Saul, whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "I am your servant." The king said, "Is there not yet anyone of the house of Saul to whom I may show kindness, to whom I may show the kindness of God?" And Ziba said to the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan who is crippled in both feet." So the king said to him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said to the king, Behold, he is in the house of Micah, the son of Amiel, in Lodebar.
Good. Okay, so in contrast, what would a king normally do? Yeah. Yeah, from what I've read, a king would seek out any survivors of the previous dynasty and then, kill them. So why did David want to do this instead? Can you remember? Okay, so it goes back, very good, it goes back to 1 Samuel 20. He hadn't forgotten that covenant that he made with Jonathan. Also, he made a promise to Saul in chapter 20, 1 Samuel chapter 24. So David, he had integrity, right? He was a trustworthy guy in general. It was someone who would hold to his end of the bargain no matter how long had gone, how many years had gone by. And I'm sure that you would agree this is a quality that is sorely lacking in today's society. And of course, we should all ask, do I see that quality in myself? Am I trustworthy no matter what has happened, no matter how long? Now, okay, verse 3, you'll notice how David said the kindness of God. David was simply reciprocating the kindness that God had shown him. All right, what about us? Are we told anything like that in the New Testament? Oh yeah, give you a few examples. Romans 15:7. Therefore accept one another just as Christ also accepted us to the glory of God. Ephesians 4:32. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you. Colossians 3:13. Bearing with one another and forgiving each other, whoever has a complaint against anyone, just as the Lord forgave you, so also should you. 1 John 4:11. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. And there are other passages. What's the problem? The problem is we really like it, and we want to receive, of course, the mercy of God. We want to receive the kindness of God, the love of God. We're very happy to let God show that mercy to us. But then we want to withhold it from others. We want others to earn it, or we want them to get what's coming to them or get what's due, whatever, something like that. That's a problem. Anyway, back to Mephibosheth. Say that 5 times fast. Chapter 4, verse 4, we read this. Now Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son crippled in his feet. He was 5 years old, and when the report of Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened that in her hurry to flee, he fell and became lame, and his name was Mephibosheth. Lodebar, where he was hanging out, it seems to mean, when you look it up, it means no thing or no word. Like maybe it's just this obscure, just a small, unimportant place. Some people believe it was over there east of the Jordan by Mahanaim. So, yeah, the idea is it's possible that he's hiding. He's in hiding. Okay, so let's go on with the story here, verses 5 through 8. Who's got this one? Thank you.
So King David had him brought from Lodebar, from the house of Micah, son of Amiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. And David said, Mephibosheth, at your service, he replied. Don't be afraid, David said to him, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you always eat at my table. Mephibosheth bowed down and said, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?
Good. Okay, so notice how David said, don't be afraid. I mean, the guy might have been physically shaking. He probably was thinking, he found me, he's summoning me to take my life. Because, anyone else who had become king, they just might have done that. So he said that he would restore to him the land of his grandfather Saul, probably speaking of Saul's ancestral land in Kish. Verse 8, a dead dog, meaning useless and contemptible. You remember that the Jews, they didn't really like dogs. Now, I think this is a good illustration of grace, if you'll let me get a little homiletical here, because we are also like dead dogs, but we are invited to come and live in the King's house. In fact, the King of Kings' house. And like Mephibosheth, we need to recognize our unworthiness. Humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord, and he will exalt you. James 4:10. Okay, let's go on verses 9 through 13. Who's got this one? Over here. Thank you. Verses 9 through 13.
Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land and to bring him the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for it. And Mephibosheth's grandson of your master will always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, Your servant will do whatever the Lord, my lord the king commands his servant to do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all of the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table, and he was lame in both feet.
So I suspect it was a pretty significant property because, for David to command that all of Ziba's sons and servants are to cultivate it for him. All right, so what's going to happen? As we're going to see later, just a bit of a spoiler alert here, Ziba is going to come to covet that land. And when David's son Absalom rebels, Ziba is going to falsely accuse Mephibosheth of the desire to take the throne from David. That'll be in chapter 16. And sadly, he was very convincing. And David believed Ziba and gave all that belonged to Mephibosheth to Ziba. But of course, Mephibosheth later cleared his name in chapter 19, so the story ends up being just fine. Okay, so it seems that looking here at verses 11b through 13, I think these verses are there to show the extent of David's kindness. And to say that, see, Mephibosheth, everything is great. I mean, he had everything he could ever have wanted or needed except for his feet, of course. And so here's the point I want to make here. Life isn't fair. And it sure isn't perfect. And sometimes people drop us, and it causes us problems for the rest of our lives. Or sometimes we drop ourselves, or whatever, or just, something drops out of the sky. But we're not going to find perfection until we go to be with God. Life isn't fair. So yeah, he had everything he possibly wanted, but then what it says, he was lame in both feet. So, yep. Okay, before moving on, any other questions or comments on chapter 9? Anything jump out at you? Over here. He's a-coming.
2 Samuel chapter 5, when David took Jerusalem, and the Jebusites on the wall said that even the blind and the lame could fight off his army. Mm-hmm. And David made a statement there. He said, this is the origin of the saying, the blind and the lame may not enter the house. So that was a saying around the temple there, that the blind and the lame would not be entering the palace. And yet David calls Mephibosheth and brings him into his house. I think that's remarkable.
So, yeah, there are a number of different theories. We talked about when we went through that passage, the different theories on what that actually meant and what was being said there. And was it talking about the temple later on? Was it talking about his palace there? Was it talking about just was he using that term blind and lame to refer to the Jebusites? That's another theory. Because, just saying that they're all blind and lame, because, even the blind and lame can keep you away. So one idea was that the Jebusites were not allowed into his palace. They weren't allowed access. There are so many different theories because we just don't know. But here, yes, what do we see? We see he's bringing someone who's lame into his palace. So I think there's something different going on with that passage there. And the scholars are all over the place with their different theories. And also the translations are all over the place as well with how they translate it. Because the word house can be used in lots of different ways. It's just a very generic term for a building. Over here.
In verse 11, it says, so Mephibosheth ate at David's table as one of the king's sons. And I think it's really important to know that sometimes when we fulfill a covenant or a promise that we do, that our heart really isn't in it. But his was. He doesn't just take care of him. You know, okay, I made that promise, I'm going to make sure he's fed. But he brings him in and treats him like one of his sons. So that is really grace. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's not just mercy, it's like it's grace, yeah. And that is how God treats us, because we're just a bunch of dead dogs. And yet he brings us, he wants us to be sitting at his table. Anything else jumped out at you? Okay. All right, let's go on then. Who's got verses 1 through 5 of chapter 10? So now we're going to see David's desire to show kindness to the Ammonites. So first, David's desire to show kindness to the house of Saul. Now his desire to show kindness to the Ammonites. Who's got verses 1 through 5? Just anyone who likes to read. Over here. And remember, when you guys come to one of those crazy Hebrew or other type of names, just pretend you know how it's pronounced.
In the course of time, the king of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanun succeeded him as king. David thought, I will show kindness to Hanun, son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me. So David sent a delegation to express his sympathy to Hanun concerning his father. When David's men came to the land of the Ammonites, the Ammonite commander said to Hanun, their lord, do you think David is honoring your father by sending envoys to you to express sympathy? Hasn't David sent them to you only to explore the city and spy it out and overthrow it? So Hanun seized David's envoys, shaved off half of each man's beard, cut off their garments at the buttocks, and sent them away. When David was told about this, he sent messengers to meet the men, for they were greatly humiliated. The king said, stay at Jericho till your beards have grown, and then come back.
Okay, so the Ammonites, they were the people who lived east of the Jordan. They were the ones who were descended from Lot's younger daughter by Lot himself. That's Genesis chapter 19, if you remember that. Okay, so now looking at verse 2 here. Nahash, this guy's father, he was the nasty eye gouger, if you remember, that we found in 1 Samuel 11. So remember, he was going to gouge out all of the eyes of the people of Jabesh Gilead, but Saul came to their rescue. So what I suspect happened here is he probably helped David during the time that David was on the run from Saul, just to spite Saul, I suspect. But anyway, he had been nice to David, so he wanted to do something here. Now keep in mind, as we move along, everything that's about to happen happened because of this opinion. This mistaken opinion of some of the princes, or maybe your version translated it as commanders. They give this opinion, and it is wrong, and it is taken, and so this is what happens. So just be careful when people start throwing around their opinions. So forcibly shaving off someone's beard, that's still regarded as a great indignity in certain cultures, like, for example, the Arabs. That is a big deal. It's also by the Amish. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, there was that Amish feud, and they would jump them and shave their beard off. It was terrible for them. So it's still a big deal to forcibly shave someone's beard off, depending on the culture. But shaving half of it, I guess that was just pretty embarrassing. And so just like his father, it seems like he liked to do nasty things to people and let them live. At least he didn't gouge their eye out. All right, so looking at verse 5, I mean, it must have been seriously humiliating, because what does David, what does he do? You can just hang out there till it grows back. I suspect it was really degrading in that culture for David to have to tell them that. But I think, I don't know, David is so considerate. I think that's another good quality. It's like, you guys are fine, don't come back, just wait till it grows back. Now, from what I've read, in that culture, and it's true in cultures today, what is the abuse of an ambassador? That's a big deal. The abuse of an ambassador is often considered a just cause for war. It's an affront to the nation. Well, I kind of see a parallel here with us today. So, when we go to people as God's ambassadors, as representatives, and that's a term used, 2 Corinthians, for example, what happens? Many times people will shame us. They will persecute and shame us. But Jesus told his disciples in Luke 10:16, the one who listens to you listens to me. And the one who rejects you rejects me. And he who rejects me rejects the one who sent me. So Jesus takes it as if it was done to him personally. What did he say to Saul? You remember on the road to Damascus? Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? He was persecuting Christians. Yeah, Acts 9:4 and 9:5. Okay, let's go on verses 6 through 8. Who's got this one? Thank you.
Verses 6 through 8. When the Ammonites realized that they had become obnoxious to David, they hired 20,000 Aramean foot soldiers from Beth Rehob and Zobah, as well as the king of Maacah with 1,000 men, and also 12,000 men from Tob. On hearing this, David sent Joab out with the entire army of fighting men. The Ammonites came out and drew up in battle formation at the entrance of their city gate, while the Arameans of Zobah and Rehob and the men of Tob and Maacah were by themselves in the open country.
Good. All right, so looking at verse 6, as I mentioned last time, the Arameans, they're the ones who would later be called the Syrians. And that's located north of the Ammonites. And I'm sure it wasn't cheap to hire that many mercenaries. That's a serious amount of people. But notice that David, he waited till he heard of them getting ready for war. They were the ones who started it, not David. And it doesn't mention it here, but we learn from 1 Chronicles 19:7 that this city in verse 8 is Medeba in the land of Reuben. Okay, let's go on verses 9 through 14. Who's got that? Over here. Thank you.
Then Joab saw the battle was set against him both in front and in the rear. He chose some of the best men of Israel and arrayed them against the Syrians. The rest of his men he put in the charge of Abishai, his brother, and he arrayed them against the Ammonites. And he said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come and help you. Be of good courage, and let us be courageous for our people and for the cities of our people. And may the Lord be what seems good to him. Do what seems good to him. So Joab and the people who were with him drew near to battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the Ammonites saw that the Syrians fled, they likewise fled before Abishai, and entered the city. Then Joab returned from fighting against the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem.
Good. Okay, what version is that, by the way? The ESV. So I thought it was interesting. Someone read from that version last week. They decided that they're not going to call them the Arameans. They're just going to call them their future name of Syrians. That's fine. They can do that. But in the text, in the Hebrew there, they are referred to as their ancient term of Arameans. But yeah, it's just for understanding's sake. Okay, so it looks like Joab and Abishai, they're not in the best position, and maybe they're even outnumbered. And you know, when we have overwhelming odds against us, well, I think we ought to take the advice of Joab. Be strong and courageous, and God will do the rest. Because ultimately, God is the one who decides the outcome, not man. And yes, okay, God, he may allow whatever will happen to happen, or, you know, but then again, he may have other plans, and he may intervene. Anyway, we just need to do our best, and then leave the rest in the hands of God. I reckon that's a pretty good life motto. Do your best, leave the rest in the hands of God. Now, so here's a side note. I got to point this out. We can see that even Joab, a guy he's got serious problems, right? He's got so many flaws. He was still able to come up with some good advice from time to time. And that is why we should never reject something because of its source. That's referred to as the genetic fallacy. Rejecting something simply because of where it came from. Truth is truth. And good advice is good advice regardless of its origin. So if you don't know, yourlogicalfallacyis.com, great place online. When people are arguing online sometimes and someone does a logical fallacy, they'll give them a link. And so they can click and say, your logical fallacy is this is what you just did. So anyway, don't go for the genetic fallacy. Truth is truth no matter where it comes from. Good advice is good advice no matter what the source. So anyway, Joab came up with some really good advice here. Okay, anything on that? All right, let's go on to verses 15 through 19. Over here, thank you. Verses 15 through 19.
But when the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered themselves together. And Hadadezer sent and brought out the Syrians who were beyond the Euphrates. They came to Helam, with Shobach, the commander of the army of Hadadezer, at their head. And when it was told David, he gathered all Israel together and crossed the Jordan and came to Helam. The Syrians arrayed themselves against David and fought with him, and the Syrians fled before Israel. And David killed of the Syrians the men of 700 chariots and 40,000 horsemen, and wounded Shobach, the commander of their army, so that he died there. And when all the kings who were servants of Hadadezer saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and became subject to them. So the Syrians were afraid to save the Ammonites anymore.
Okay, so this time David himself went, and he headed up his forces. So this battle was important enough for him to go. And that can mean a lot when a leader is actually there. For example, I read that he's exaggerating, right? But Wellington, he would say that Napoleon's presence on the battlefield was worth about 40,000 men. That's like having about 40,000 extra men if you had Napoleon's presence on the battlefield. Anyway, it's just a big deal that David came himself. Okay, so looking at verse 18, 1 Chronicles 19:18 says that these were 40,000 foot soldiers, not horsemen. So, all right, so we talked about this last week. Again, like some of the ones we looked at last time, this could have been a copyist error, possibly from an older, worn-out scroll. And he couldn't actually read what the word was. But when we see these copyist errors, for example, when we compare like Samuel to Chronicles or Kings to Chronicles, they're usually nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It'd be like a number discrepancy or, horseman to footman type of thing. It doesn't change anything, but they are there because we see a few of them like this. Anyway, I like how verse 19 says, so the Arameans feared to help the sons of Ammon anymore. No kidding. They learned their lesson. Okay, so everything is great at this point. This is the height of Israel's glory. This is it. And why? Well, because David is leading them in the ways of God. See, he's leading them the way the Lord would have him lead them. And he's consulting God. He's trying to follow his word. He's trying to reciprocate the way God has treated him, all this stuff. Deuteronomy 28, 1 and 2, God promised them, now it shall be if you diligently obey the Lord your God, being careful to do all his commandments, which I command you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth. All these blessings will come upon you and overtake you if you obey the Lord your God. That was for Israel. Okay. Now, in the following chapters of 2 Samuel, we're going to really see the consequences of disobedience. I really wish that chapter 10 was the end. I wish that was the last chapter and it ended with, and they lived happily ever. You know, they lived happily ever after. Oh well. It's not going to happen that way, sadly. Okay, so what are some of the lessons then we get from these two chapters? What are some of the things that we can learn?
Be careful who you jump to go support.
Okay, so when people throwing out advice, yeah, you might want to get a bunch. There's a number of proverbs in the book of Proverbs that talk about getting lots of different advice, having many counselors. Yeah, just be careful with the advice that you're getting. You follow some bad advice, and it may put you on a spiral that's going to be, yeah. Look at all the stuff that happened to them. Keep your word. So David, he's keeping his word to Jonathan and Saul. Even all these years later, keep your word. Trustworthiness, integrity. What else?
Repay kindness with kindness.
Good. And reciprocating the way God has treated us. Reciprocating the kindness of God to others. There's that parable, you remember in Matthew chapter 18, where he's received this great forgiveness from the king, but what does he do? He goes on and he chokes his fellow slave who owes him just this very paltry amount in comparison. How often do we do that? We don't reciprocate to others the way God has treated us. Boy, we want them to pay. We want them to get what's due. And there are some passages that talk about the people who refuse to show mercy and how they will be treated in the end. Yeah. All right, what else can we learn?
Be kind regardless of the result. And David will send people to him.
Well, okay, so yes, they were definitely mistreated, you mean? And he was trying to do something good. And sometimes, and that's a good point too, because sometimes when you're trying to do something good, like for example, bring the gospel to people, you're trying to save them. And yet they mistreat you in return. And they cut half your beard off and they cut your robes off in the middle type of thing. So does that mean you quit? I'm not going to lie. There have been times in my life where I've gotten a little gun shy because I've been mistreated when I tried to bring someone the gospel. But we need to just keep going and doing the best we can. And like Jesus said, look, they're doing it to you, but they're really doing it to me. Okay? And what's going to happen in the end is eventually he's going to make everything right in the end. But we just need to do our part and just hang in there, just keep on keeping on, being ambassadors, and, good. What else?
I think it's easy, as humans, it's easy for us to get on a bandwagon when someone is being embarrassed. It's easy to pick at them too. And you don't see David doing that here. He leaves them with their dignity intact.
Good.
And he is very careful with them and loving to them and doesn't want them shamed. I think that's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, he could have laughed at them and thought it was funny. And yeah, that's right. Good. So leave people with their dignity. He's like, you don't even have to come back to work till your beards have grown back. Yeah, that was good.
Somebody already mentioned David showing kindness. That's one of the lessons. But not only showing kindness, but also not wanting to take revenge and not even having a feeling of revenge at all, because Saul was not at all the person he should have been to David after all that David did for, like, David fought in his battles for him, and David resisted to kill him in numerous accounts. And so again, I mean, the family bloodline was seen a little differently probably than we would see things today, because I might look at you and, you know, I wouldn't associate you a whole lot with your grandparents, but back then obviously things were a little different. So
some cultures still do, but yeah,
sure,
I get your point. Go ahead.
And so that was something big. And, you know, like you already mentioned, it's really, really hard for us to not want to take revenge on someone and to give them mercy, even though God has very generously given us mercy. It's really hard. I mean, I think I heard somebody say this once, that it's like, if you took out, if you didn't watch, or if you removed all of the movies in America that had revenge, you would have basically no movies left, because that's what people want to see. They want to see, you know, revenge. Like, there's so many things in our culture, and in plenty of cultures, that just,
we
it's really easy to
like
give revenge.
justice and getting
justice.
revenge and people getting what's due, but for Christians, that's to be left to the courts and left to the judgment at the end of time. But yes, so the good point, David, he had these opportunities to take out Saul, and he didn't. He spared him. He even promised Saul that he would be good to his ancestors, and he's making good on that. So yes, where he might have felt the desire for revenge against Saul's ancestors, he wasn't going to do that, because he's a person of his word. And again, as we see, reciprocating showing the kindness of God. Good. What else? Over here. Hang on. He's coming. He's coming.
I was just going to say, it might be better to go out and fight with your armies than stay home alone.
Okay. Can you go on with that? You have a further point? So the leaders need to be out there fighting as well, not just sending everyone to fight for them. So we need the elders and the preachers and the deacons and the teachers to be out there, not just telling everyone what to do, but doing it themselves. Yep. What was that? Matthew 23, Jesus was talking about they lay up heavy burdens on people, and yet they won't even try to lift them with a finger. They won't even give a finger's worth of effort to do those things that they're tying at, these burdens that they're throwing on other people's shoulders to do. That's not good of a leader. What else?
God will do what is.
Hang on, he's coming. He's coming.
God will do what is right. We could want something, like David would have wanted to win the battle or the war, but I guess.
You mean what Joab said?
Yeah, what Joab said. He said, the Lord will do what is good in his sight.
Yeah.
So even though he wanted to win, he left it up to God anyway. It's God's will.
Yep. And I love that. Just your part is to be strong and courageous, and God's going to do what's right in his eyes. And that's a great motto. Just do your best and leave the rest up to God. Okay, so I just jotted down 5 of the ones that I liked, and you guys mentioned a bunch of other good ones as well. I'd say the importance of being trustworthy, keeping true to what we say we will do, like David. The importance of reciprocating the kindness God has shown us. Like with Mephibosheth, God invites us to live in his house and eat at his table, even though we do not deserve it. And then looking at his feet, life isn't fair and it sure isn't perfect. We're not going to find perfection until we go to be with God. And again, sometimes people drop us, and we just got to get over it and do the best we can with life and keep looking to the next life. And then, like with the messengers of David, when people persecute and shame us, our king takes it personally, and he will do something about it in the end. Okay, any last questions or comments? That was our last bell. So appreciate you guys being here tonight. Lots and lots of good comments. You guys come back next week. We'll continue on chapter 11.